Okay, so in this screencast, I'm going to get the basic functionality of the game and show you how you control that with key presses, how to add key presses to both start the game and then have the game running, and then what to do when the game is finished. So we're going to ignore the countdown mode for now, but after we get the basics of the game functioning, we'll throw in the countdown mode. Okay, so the most important thing to know is that you need to know how to detect key presses. Now, because really the Pygame functions is designed to run in an IDE and not an online IDE, we had some input-output issues with using Replit. So as a result, we're going to have to use the basic Pygame code for detecting key presses. And it's a little bit longer it's much longer than what you would need if you were just using Pygame functions. And as soon as we're using PyCharm, as our IT people get PyCharm configured on the PCs here at school, uh, we can start using the Pygame functionality for key presses, which is much easier than, we can use the Pygame functions uh, functionality for key presses in its code instead of the basic Pygame code. But for now, we'll have to use the basic Pygame code since you guys are working in Replit. Okay, so so when the game is in startup mode, aside from showing directions and maybe playing music, the most important thing is to check for a key press to start the game. Okay, and the way you check for a key press is using this for loop right here. Okay, and over here on the final line, so it's this for loop with two if statements inside the for loop. Okay, and then to detect a specific key, you put the name of the key right there. Now, what I would recommend is stick with the letter keys for now. I'll have to look up what the special symbols are. I think a few of you, Connor C. and uh, Colin may already know what they are, but for now, just stick with letters. So this is what's gonna in here is what I'm gonna have happen when the S key is pressed. Okay, now you're gonna need this in each section of the game. Well, you're gonna need to detect key presses. Um, so in the startup mode, when we want to detect when the S key is pressed, then what happens when the S key is pressed? Well, we change the value of game state to be running. The reason we do that is the next time the while loop executes, which is like 50 or 60 times a second, game state is going to be assigned the value running. So when this if statement executes, well, game state is no longer startup, it's going to be running. And we'll handle countdown a little bit later. But for now, just throw the game into running mode. And then what's going to happen when the game is running? Well, we're going to listen for the key presses to uh, 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 move the sprites across the screen. So like I used A and L to move my sprites. So I'm going to need two if statements right there and there. And I do A and L. Okay, so if those are pressed, what do? I reposition my sprite across the screen. Now, here's one trick you can also do. If you go up and you make a variable that's called, distance to move, so like distance to move equals 5, okay, well, if I'm moving that distance, whatever the value of that variable is, then the new location of my red airplane, assuming that um, the A moves the red airplane, is I'm going to say red x plus equals distance to move. So I've increased the variable that I'm going to use to position the sprite, and now I have to move my sprite. So I say move sprite, red airplane, okay, and then red x, red y. Okay, so that'll move the sprite that specific distance. So if I have a blue airplane, then obviously, and I had similar variables, I would do, blue x plus equals distance to move, and move sprite blue airplane, and then it would be blue x and blue y. Now you may say, why don't you just put in the number for y? Um, or I'm sorry, the number for distance to move here. So we could actually hard code in like a 5 right there. The problem is it'll make it much easier for you to edit your game if you have a variable for that, because then if you want to, for example, debug your game by making the game ridiculously easy just so you can finish the game and see if the finished code works, then all you need to do is change this variable right there up at the top, and then that will be reflected when the game is running. So that's why it's a good idea to make a variable for that value as well. Okay, so then how do we check to see if somebody won? Well, we want to see if the value of red x or blue x has reached a certain value. So I'm going to say if red x is greater than, and let's say I'm going to do, and here's another thing you can do, make a variable for the finish line, which is basically going to be how many pixels across the screen, what the coordinates of the location where one of the sprites wins if they make it there. So I'm going to say like finish line equals 800. Okay, so now I say if red x greater than finish line or and then I can't remember if it's lowercase or uppercase, blue x, or here, let me just go and test it and see if I get an error. I'm over on the my other screen. If x equals 2 or it is lowercase, okay, or blue x greater than finish line, then game state equals finished. Okay, so that throws the game into finished mode, and you will no longer be able to move the sprites because somebody won. So you want kind of the sprites to no longer respond to the key presses, which will happen because the next time the while loop executes, now game state is assigned finished. So none of this code that we already wrote up here will execute. Only the code in the section of the if statement where it checks to see if game state is finished will execute, and that is where you're going to change, the message, announce the winner, prompt the user to press a key to start a new game, something along those lines, which I'll handle in the next video.